we want to sit in this circle with you because we want to make this as a very conversational day as possible. So hopefully you all are up for that as well. My name is Lauren Worley, and for 2.5 years, I was the Chief Communications and Engagement Officer for Cincinnati Public Schools. Among the people who helped select me for that role is the woman next to me, Carolyn Jones, who I'll introduce here in a second. Most of my career has been spent in politics and government. My folks were school teachers, and I will tell you that I had zero interest in working in public schools. In fact, when someone approached me about applying for the job, I said nobody would want to do that, I think was my first comment. And my second comment is, I don't know anything about how to do that. I changed my mind around 8:10 on a Monday morning, 10 minutes into a phone conversation with then Superintendent Laura Mitchell, who had the most articulate and extraordinary way of outlining her vision for what public schools mean. And for me, what challenged me to think about it was, it's not just lunches, and it's not just school buses, and it's not just books and paper. It's about society, and it's about our culture, and it's about our community. And that really, well, in a way, I think it radicalized me, maybe, I don't know. But I knew I wanted to do anything possible to do that job. I left the school district a couple years ago, just before COVID, and I work for a corporation here in town. But I'm thrilled to, my part of today's conversation will be from more the administration point of view, when you're engaging with administration. So I want to take a moment though, Anthony, if I can, and just say, Carolyn Jones is with us. Carolyn is retiring from the school board this year after, oh shoot, I can't remember. 16 years, okay. I was going to say 8 and I knew
counting down.
Yeah, and we're counting down. Many of those years spent as president, many of those years as other officers. So could we just give Carolyn a little love and say, I'm serious, Carolyn, because
Thank you.
I'm not going to say it's a thankless job. What I am going to say is that it is a labor of love to be a school board president and a school board member, and many, many hours of meetings sitting on relatively hard chairs. So thank you, Carolyn, for that. But I'll let Carolyn actually introduce herself a little bit more than that, and Dr. Smith as well, and then we'll like to meet all of you too.
Thank you, Lauren. She's something else. I was actually very upset that she resigned from CPS. She is great at what she does, and she was a good director in our communications department at that time. But again, welcome everybody, and as Lauren said, I'm Carolyn Jones. I am representing the board member perspective. And I think you got a dynamic trio of people to really respond to your questions and talk a little bit about how you advocate. I do want to say, Lauren did mention that I've done this work for 16 years. I started my school board career at North College Hill, which is a community of about 1,600 students. Then I bought my house, moved back in the city when my daughter got married, jumped right in the race for CPS in a district of 36,000 kids. So it was a culture shock for me at first. But during that time, my tenure at CPS, I was in the president's seat for 4 years. I was vice president for 1 year. I was chair of policy committee for 1 year. And I also continue to represent the district with the Ohio State School Board Association, so have had that experience. I am retiring from this, so I'll be permanently retired from the school board and from work because I just want to do what I want to do, and I have some things that I want to do. But it's been a pleasant experience for me to do it, and I will say my biggest challenge when I was on school board was being the president during COVID. That may come up, but I don't know. But anyway, the gentleman who did the keynote today, AJ Graybill, is working with our district. Their organization is working with our board on board development. So you may hear me repeat some of the things that he's saying, and when I greeted him, I said, just want you to know it's working. So anyway, I'm glad to be here and looking forward to your wonderful questions and anything that will help you progress and think about what you want to do. You may be running in the next term of school board. And then I'd like to turn it over to this gentleman who used to work at CPS. I'm not going to tell his story, but he was a principal, and I used to coach softball when he was a principal at the school where I went to.
All right, do you have to press this?
I don't think, do you have to press it? Just hold it. Okay, just hold it.
All right. Anthony Smith. I am a product of Cincinnati Public Schools. I've been a counselor, teacher, school psych, assistant soup, and then, of course, I transitioned to my own district because I got tired of them telling me everything to do. And I am actually but I'm actually the superintendent of Winton Woods City Schools. And excited about this opportunity. My slate is clean, so whatever questions you ask, that will be fine. I'll give you the straight answer. Sometimes the answers that people give, people don't want, but they will be true. So we have a saying in our district, in order to make our district comprehensive, we do not navigate until we communicate. And I think that becomes the fallacy of what happens in systems. People try to do more before they let people know what's going on. So can you imagine if your pilot attempted to navigate the plane before he talked to the control tower? You got a disaster. And if Joe Burrow was not in the huddle and trying to make decisions of what to do for the other 10 players, you've got a disaster. I don't know if they're really communicating with the Bengals, but they pretend to be. So at this particular point, I am going to open it up for the conversation. Ask me anything that you like, and any question that I can't ask, I'll defer to these guys.
Well, maybe here's a way to get it
Yeah,
started.
we taught everybody after
The title is, how do you advocate for what you want or feel is needed in the district? And the reason we're here is because we bring three different perspectives. From my perspective, I know what the role of a board member is. He knows what the role of an administrator is. She understands that dynamic of how things get communicated. So we think that we can cover all angles of that. So let me start by saying the role of a board member is governance. Governance. We make policy as part of governance. We approve the budget. We approve curriculum. But our primary function, and as A.J. Graybill said earlier, our primary function is to improve or impact student outcomes, period. And I'll make one more comment because I think it will help open up your thinking, and maybe you'll have questions about this. We talked about this the other day when we were talking on our Zoom call. There's a difference between activism and governance. And we can talk about that a little later. But I want you to keep that in your thinking, activism and governance. So I'll pass
I'll
it.
start with a question. I'll flip the script a little bit and maybe give an example. So one of the things districts, not just in Cincinnati, not just in Winton, but also across the country are dealing with is bus driver shortages. And that has having a huge then impact on the amount of service we can provide, kids getting to school late, getting home late, that stresses parents, all the things, and I'm seeing nods, so I know you all are noticed about that. If we think about the 3-0 here, I like that, I like the 3-0. Maybe we start with you, Carolyn. Just as a hypothetical here, we're talking about school buses being late, solving the problem. What's the role of the school board in something like that? And then, Superintendent Smith, I'd love to hear from you then. How does that then work with your role as the superintendent?
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So we've had CPS has had trouble with transportation for a number of years, and the board has struggled with this, and we've struggled for a number of reasons. But here's the broad scope for what we do. We first, as a board, we have to define the problem. We have to define what it is. We do that in our policy around transportation. That's our goal. That's our purpose. Define what our transportation system looks like and, that kind of thing. We then are giving authority to the superintendent to make it work. So we do the what, she does the how in transportation. He or he, yes, yeah, I'm thinking about CPS, but yes, he. But yes, so the distinguish between the what and the how with transportation. Now, because it's such a sensitive subject, and I think we'll probably get into this a little more, what happens is the community whose interests and the vision and the values of the community are the job of the board to listen and respond to, but because of the nature of the transportation problem, we get all the comments. The issue is, how do we as a board member deal with that? So I'll pass it on to Mr. Smith here to comment from his role.
Okay, so when you talk about transportation, taxpayers believe that I've already paid my taxes for this service, so this service should be very efficient. You should pick my kid up on time, rain or shine, no matter what. But when you give this overview that there's a shortage of drivers, they understand it's a shortage, but that shortage should not affect me. It should not affect my kid. It should affect somebody else because we paid our taxes, so the bus should be here on time no matter what. We put something in place, and we had a conversation with our parents, and we said, listen, there's a shortage across the country. My job at this point is to make it work, like Ms. Jones said, no matter what. So we put something in place. It's sort of the same kind of thing that La Rosa has. When you call 347-1111, you are not talking to the person who makes that pizza. You are not. Years ago, when Buddy La Rosa started the job, he probably had, dough on his phone and sauce on his apron and trying to make the pizza and make the call. That's not efficient. So we decided to create a call center. And the call center doesn't go to the transportation department. It gets routed to these other people that are taking calls individually and letting parents know. And see, we had a conversation with parents. Your child is going to get picked up. They may not get picked up on time, but we're going to be very efficient to let you know where they are. So can we agree that that's it? And the parent said, if you can let me know where my child is, I can go along with there's a shortage. Is that an unreasonable request? And that's to this panel, this group. Is that unreasonable? Yes or no?
I don't have children. I don't know yet. I'm listening.
Okay, all right. So in the past, we couldn't tell you where your child was or when they were getting home. We've streamlined it. We say, we can tell you where they are, we can tell you when they're getting home, and they might be late because the routes are late because the drivers are out. And the parents said that's reasonable. So we've been operating on that premise for a while, and it changed our complaints from 87 to 100 parents a day to 7. Now, people might say, okay, 7. So we're still looking for perfection because 7 people still are disenfranchised about transportation. And so we have to keep circling back. We know how many people to put into the call center every day based on how many drivers call out every morning. And so we've kind of based it on that. The problem with it, we've become very efficient with it, which makes the drivers more comfortable to call off. So one problem leads to another, and that's the life of a superintendent. And once you solve one, there's a new one to solve.
That was something I learned when I worked at CPS was the power of the bus driver in the movement, especially on those cold days. And there was at least once we had to call off school because we didn't have enough drivers. And I think we have some questions here and stuff. What I wanted to distinguish there, you heard then from Carolyn, the board has the policy, or the governance piece of it, and the administration implements. And I'm already forgetting your name, and it's on your name tag. Blake.
So I think mine isn't so much about the systems or how things operate, but you spoke about like 16 years ago, like you're retiring after 16 years, and you mentioned that Dr. Smith was a principal at the time. So I think that like you build confidence by doing, but I think the perception of power, so like if I sit here and I'm like, oh, this is a superintendent, or this is the board president, even as like someone who is in education, like that can seem intimidating, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm a parent and I maybe So, like, I see that as a barrier, and like everyone is here today because they're looking for like an entry point or a way to keep building. And so, like, what was your entry point into like this is the work that you wanted to do, and then what made you keep going? Because I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption that at some point it was intimidating, even for you as like this is your career path. But if I'm a parent and I want access, because nobody's keeping you out of the school board, but if I feel like that's not a place I'm supposed to be, then like what would make me show up there? And it's like so I'm thinking about systems.
Justice, did you get this question? Because this is, I love it, I'm serious. This is like at the core, at the heart of everything that, yeah. Carolyn,
Yeah, let me just respond to that. There's a lot packed into what you said, and I could go on for that. For me personally, and I'm not going to take up too much time talking about me personally, but my professional background is in working for the county public mental health system. I was accustomed to working through systems, so I did system work. So when my daughter was in high school, I was on PTA and all of that stuff. That wasn't for me. I didn't want to bake cupcakes and sell them at the football game. And I don't mean to belittle PTAs. They have an important role. But I wanted to feel like I could impact the system where my daughter was being educated. That's what started me at North College Hill. Now, moving forward on that, the community, and I think that's the title, well, how do you advocate? You know, the community at large gives a great deal of power and authority to the board because they don't know what the role of the board is. But it's what the board member does with that power that gets us in trouble sometimes, because sometimes the board, because they see themselves as the agent for the community, they sometimes put themselves in that role of trying to fix the problem, and that's not their role. So the power and authority that the general community sees or gives them has to be clarified when they're talking to them or trying to address an issue. And using this example about transportation, Mr. Smith explained operationally what happens in the Winton Woods District. Operationally, that's our superintendent's job, right? We shouldn't be, if we get calls all the time from the community, board members get emails, phone calls, people showing up at your house and all of that. When you gonna do this, when you gonna do that? But as a board member, I have to say, ma'am, Blake, I understand what you're saying, and I apologize that it's a problem, but I need you to call this person because this person should be able to help you. And I should be able to direct you to the proper resource who can help you with that. What happens sometimes, board members sort of lose their perspective on what their role is because they're doing too much. That's what you call activism. You're an activist, so you want to get it done, but that's not necessarily your role. So you stay focused on the big picture, the light bulb, and let the superintendent do the switch. And some of those power dynamics will play itself out. I also will say, and then I'll pass it on, I don't want to talk too much, but I will also say there are some board members that don't understand their role as a board member, so they give themselves that power.
You're kidding.
Yeah. And but AJ talked about that this morning. He talked about that. He focused on that, about the roles and how our only role is to impact student outcomes and the things that we have to do as a board. And right now, our board is in a board development process with the Council of Great City Schools to help us focus more on our role as governance. But the transportation issue is a great example of how those roles get misperceived or mischaracterized, and what board members' roles are as opposed to what administration roles are. So that was a good question.
Yeah, the other part of that is you have 5 board members or 7, depending on how big your district is, They're elected officials. They ran, they put out signs, yard signs. Superintendents were kind of selected by the board doing interviews, like a regular interview. However, as Ms. Jones mentioned, people make promises they can't deliver on. They can't keep those promises. If you have this problem and I'm a school board member, call me, I'll take care of this. I think the worst part of it, if you watch boards that, in my opinion, are struggling, they're struggling because they're trying to identify themselves of who's supposed to be doing what. And it's usually, they're struggling usually because they're in the superintendent's lane, my opinion. And if you watch boards where I can tell you, if you watch the board very carefully, I can tell you who's running for the board based on how much they talk in the meetings, because they want to get themselves acclimated to the community's interest to say, we're going to do all of these extraordinary things because you would select me because I can make it happen. And as Ms. Jones mentioned, that's not their role. And they may tell you on the phone, okay, call the superintendent. That's kind of where it stops, because the superintendent will take care from there, because I have a staff of people that can manage it to make it work to the parents' satisfaction. Now, there are some unreasonable people out there that want services that are not really guaranteed, but when the board says that you'll get certain things, we have to be very careful about what we promise, because some things we cannot deliver on.
Blake, real quick, and April will come to you. Blake, I loved your question, so let's make sure we catch up after this. One important thing, just from coming from Cleveland. Cleveland has a very different system up there because the mayor appoints the superintendent, and so it's a little different. But the rest of us, it's more like exactly what we described. I've read a really powerful book, and I'm going to. It's written by a Cliftonite, being a Cliftonite myself, Peter Block. The book's called Community. You can check it out. You can, if you want a copy, I'll buy it for you. I just recently met Peter, and so this is not. I don't make any proceeds off the book. What I think is so important, Blake, is we're thinking about whether you're a school board president, whether you're an administrator or the superintendent, or whether you're someone who works in the district at any level, is how are you inviting people and how are you including them? If I learned anything from, I'll just be truthful. My parents were teachers. School was fun for me. I do alumni stuff. I loved it, right? School is a painful place for many people, for many parents, and then we say to them, come back to the school to learn how to do this. That look you just gave is the right look. I'm not going down there. I'm not, right? It's maybe even trauma for some people, right? We have to be, when we, and I'll use myself as an example. If some like middle-aged, perky white woman with no children invites you to a school board event at 5 p.m. down at the district office with no daycare and no food and no whatever, why are you going to come to that? Why would the parents of Chase School come to that? We have, first of all, I've invited them on my terms to a place, the school board office. What is that? Like, they probably have never been there. Hopefully they've never been there. They have kids they got to pick up. 5 o'clock, they're getting off work. Like, I have made that on that inclusion. Well, I invited people to my meeting. No one showed up, but I did it on my terms. Right. When we have, if I can share nothing else with you today, what I learned from my time at Cincinnati Public is you have to invert the triangle. We cannot say people didn't show up. If people didn't show up or people didn't use their voice, we didn't ask them in the right way.
Okay. Wow. Power Pack, in a very solid perspective on what's going on, and specifically in CPS. And what I'm about to say, I don't want it to be perceived that I'm making excuses, because there are none. First of all, we have 6,000 staff. At any point in time, they all could be unhappy or they all could be happy. We never know. We have begun to, our administration is working on this, but it is being driven by some of those same concerns that you have spoken about across the district, which represents vision and mission and all of that, and that is positive school culture. And the psychological well-being of teachers and all of that. So we as the board recognize that for us, that's the reason why we're losing staff, right? So we know what the issue is. We haven't been able to pinpoint why, although I would say that it's probably a variety of reasons. Some people don't care much for the new superintendent or her policy, or not her policies, but her actions. Some people don't like the way things are changing, and our district has been in flux now for the past, well, since COVID, but even more so now since we have a new superintendent who is doing things her way. It's very different. And so that's an adjustment for people, and sometimes people struggle with that. And I am not passing judgment one way or the other on whether what she's doing is right or wrong, but she's the leader of the district, right? So we are taking steps to develop a stronger and a more positive school culture. We now have hired, it was added to our budget, at most of the high schools, assistant principal of positive school culture, whose job is specifically to work on some of those things that you're talking about. And then there is a person who has been hired in administration as the director of positive school culture, because those are the very things that we need to improve on, because we do want people to stay. It's too hard to hire staff now. You know, retention it's constant, it's moving, it's changing. So I appreciate the comment because it's a real issue, but again, from a board member perspective, again, we recognize this is what the overall picture looks like. We're concerned about retention and what's going on and whatever. Okay, superintendent, your job is to do this. Let us know. Come back and report to us how things are going. I do want to take it to another angle, because a lot of times what happens, the staff, and I'll use the staff as an example because we talked about the community. Staff will call board members. And our policy, and our policy says you work through the chain of command, right? So if you were to call me as a board member, as a staff person, and say, oh, this is going on in my school and we don't like it and da-da-da-da-da, I'm gonna say to you, have you talked to your principal? Have you talked to this person? Have you talked to your union? Use the chain of command, right? Now, if you're a board member and you're getting involved in the day-to-day stuff at the school, if I'm your board colleague, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. That's me. I'm going to say you shouldn't be involved in that. You should understand where they're coming from. We know what the situation is. You should be helping them identify the process in which they go about achieving that. Our job is to hold the superintendent accountable to getting that work done. And as AJ talked about today, you know, the superintendent reports to us. The superintendent and the treasurer reports to the board. We have to hold her accountable. So she has a performance evaluation. Every superintendent does. I'm guessing you do too, right? You have a performance evaluation. You have to build measures in there that address those specific things. You have to set expectations for what you want, and then you have to give it time to work. Right. Nothing's going to change overnight. So I respect what you say, and I do believe, especially in CPS, where we've had so many changes, we have set the expectation. We've set the bar. We've set a fair bar, something that can be achieved. It's going to take a while, but we're going to get there. I might not be there, but we're going to get there.
Oh, you'll be on the beach somewhere with a mindset.
Somewhere.
So you mentioned about surveys and different things, all right? So I'm going to give you a quick example. All right, over here. Move your book for a minute. Hey, you're the principal, and you know everybody's trying to get rid of you. All right. So I'm just letting you know. So what's next? What is the reaction of the principal? It's like, who's trying to get rid of me? And I think that sometimes when people bring this coup to the table about what they're going to overthrow, they need to be very, very careful that this is going to be a chain reaction. The problem that you run into is you stop worrying about the children and start worrying about the bigs. When you start worrying about the bigs, that's where you stay. And I can tell you student achievement will suffer. So we're a project-based learning district, and my administrators like the work. They like the camaraderie, they like the interaction, but they also have principal meetings among themselves to talk about how they can become better leaders. And they have to have that opportunity. We bring parents in and we have conversations and we do those surveys, but these surveys are not intended. And you have to look at how your survey is written. If your survey is written in a way to try to destroy someone's confidence, I bet you'll be able to do that. So it's all about how you set the guidelines up. And when the principal is saying, I'm not receptive, then that goes to the superintendent. And basically, you're saying you're going to be receptive to listen to the people. They're not necessarily trying to get rid of you. You're getting rid of yourself if you don't cooperate and work with the team. This is a team. This is not an individual situation. And so what's the role of the superintendent? It's very simple. I'm responsible for everything, and I get credit for nothing. That's just the way. That's the way that it is. And if you think you're going to get these accolades and all these, there's so many different innovative things that we've brought to the table that these things should not just be on a superintendent's gallery. They should be things that are good for children. If you've done the work that's good for children, then it will shine through every single time. But when you start talking about getting rid of people, no one stands there to be a target. People start defending themselves, and then they say, okay, whose team are you on? And now, again, as I mentioned before, you're not focusing on the students, you're focusing on your own adult issues.
Yeah, I just love man, I could go on about this, but I'm not, because you guys have questions. What I would say is we're all responsible for school culture, too. I think of school secretaries, by the way, should be paid like a chief of staff and not whatever they are. Because who greets every kid every morning, all the things?
First line of defense.
The most radical thing I'm going to say today is community and parents have a lot to do with school culture as well. In fact, maybe the most part of it. And that's something we're not going to be able to crack into today, but something so important. Let's go to our principal over here.
Just make this
Yeah, what is
comment
this?
here.
What does this say?
This is AJ's mantra. Student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change.
I love it.
Our board is trying to live by this. We're not there yet. But your example fits kind of this because you can get so involved and engulfed in all that other stuff. And our superintendent here reminds us that kids should be at the center of everything we do. That's why I said earlier, the board should be focused on impacting student outcomes. The rest of it, work it out yourself.
And we've got 15 minutes, too, so I just want to keep it rolling.
Like, I live for this, right? So even like as a reading specialist, you have a science degree. And I understand everything, I'm in total agreement. But I don't think people really understand what's happening in the classroom in these buildings where the leadership is saying, don't do this, because you have to respect your leadership. And then we have two reading specialists, myself and the other one. The other one's being blind compliance. Been a reading specialist for over 20 years, knowing what's best for students, doing what the principal says. I'm the road.
get a couple more voices in here, and time we go here, and we'll go here, yeah. I can't see your name, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say here. There, thank you.
Well, I add two things. One, we have a community advisory council, and the students are actually the ones who lead it, and we're very student-led. But another thing I want to say about the board, curriculum was an issue. We need project-based learning. You know, everybody doesn't learn the same way. Of course, the principal tells us, I go to the board meeting, we go to the board meeting, we're sitting in executive session for 2 hours. So anytime that we try to bring something that's going on to them, they always end up in that way. So until it's like, nobody's gonna sit there and wait for it, you know what I mean?
Right.
Especially when we know that it's like hours and hours. How would you handle that?
Okay, so our whole district is PBL. And the reason we became PBL is we saw that there was a small group of kids that got the introduction of being project-based learning. They were doing better than everyone. And so when you see that there's a group of kids doing better, you have to figure out how to make all kids do better. So we are PBL, we're one of the most comprehensive districts in the country. We're project-based learning from preschool to 12, the whole system. Because I don't want to shock my kids later on that she's a 9th grader now, she never had the experience, and she walks into a 9th grader, now you have to do it. I want you to grow into the experience. Our 9th grade students are engaged in PBL. They will do over 100 presentations before they graduate from high school. So the interpersonal communications and that eye-to-eye contact and all of that, it really changes the whole scope. We can teach people how to do anything. How do people get fired, board member? They get fired because they don't get along with other people. That's why they get fired. They don't get fired because they are incompetent, because you can teach me. So if you can teach kids how to be interpersonal, related to other kids, and how to work in collaboration, if this is my friend, if we have a conflict, we're working on a project together, the goal is to get the best grade, we're not going to have that conflict. We're going to get that grade. We're going to make it work. And then all of a sudden, when we get the great grade, we're saying, man, we're friends now. Let's go make other A's and do other great things. So when you talk about the collaboration has to be all the way through. It can't just be a select few. So you have to push that envelope and say, this can work. But you also have to give the superintendent and the board some ideas about, I'm going to bring something to the table and I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you data that this works, because everybody has a great idea until it's not.
We've got time for, let's do one more question, and then I'll invite our panelists. Any last thoughts after that? So let's grab yours.
Yeah, I've had the privilege to work with many of our great board members, personally and professionally here, specifically in Cincinnati. And obviously, board members as elected officials have a duty to listen to the public, even if they do sometimes draw out that duty. What I'm struggling with is, how do you recommend getting the ear, getting the attention of, getting the voice of our administration, when there is not that direct, like, mandate to have that interaction with public eye or the activists? Because there are things that, like, I have board member support on specific issues, but the actual things that need to take place are things that the superintendent or the administration needs to actually put in place. And there's a struggle, from, at least as an advocate for me, between, like, having the support of the board and being able to actually get an ear in the administration, because they're very, very busy. And also, they don't have that requirement and the mandate to be open to the public.
Okay, I have to admit, there's something in what you said that I missed. I think my friend here got it. And so I do want to respond from a board member, but there was something in there that I missed. So your specific question is, how do board members say that again?
What do you recommend to advocates to best get in touch with the administration and with superintendents when they, unlike board members, don't have the mandate to be, like, open to the public?
Oh, well, I don't know the district you're from. I don't know if you're from CPS. Okay. There are several ways to get there. I can tell you what I tell people as a board member. Call the superintendent's office. Call customer service, depending on what the nature of the thing that they're expressing as their concern. If I find out that if it's a concern about transportation or is concerned about your child's grades or whatever, I as a board member, am going to direct you into what I think is appropriate. But if you say to me, I absolutely want to speak to the superintendent, I'm going to give you the superintendent's number. And they can handle that. And then I also will say, and if it's an email to me, I will let the superintendent know to expect your call and to get back with me, let me know that they've touched base. I don't necessarily have to always know the disposition. I just want to know that you've made contact with that person. And you have a right to that. You have a right to that. Yes.
But it is I was just going to add, it is the superintendent. Yeah. When I'm a chief communications officer at Cincinnati Public, who is my boss? The superintendent. My boss is nobody else.
You mean the board wasn't your boss? No.
I had a lot of bosses. Carolyn would become close to second as Laura as anybody did, but you can, if you're an employee, this gets back to employee morale. I can't have like 15 people calling me. There's somebody who's on Cincinnati City Council today who used to call me every day and talk to me for 30 minutes about the magnet program. And I'm like, I can't do anything about that without my boss telling me you are talking to the wrong person. So whether it's food, like Jessica Shelley works at the superintendent to the board. So I'd say it has to be out of that policy committee. I mean, it really, really does have to be the school board's policy committee to get the right staff there. And not because people don't want to be helpful or don't care, but because if you've got the 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, you've got your own kids, your own stuff to do, this is who does my evaluation, and I'm going to listen to him, you know?
When I first became a superintendent, the Teachers Association met with the superintendent twice a year. Bad deal. Bad. Do you know how much can happen? So we actually have a meeting with the Teachers Association and also bus drivers, food service, their representatives. We meet with those groups every 10 weeks. Because we know, and if there's something else that comes up, it's 5 weeks, it's 3 weeks. The more you communicate with the superintendent, the better the deal is. Because it gives the superintendent the opportunity to go out and make things work because there are other people. Now, I can't do all of the stuff, but I know where all of the stuff is. And I know who to get it to make sure they do. Just like Ms. Jones mentioned, she would say, okay, contact the superintendent. I'm going to say, you contact food service. They have 24, our method of communication is always 24 hours. They have 24 hours to get back to you, to tell you, it may not be what you want to hear, but they're going to respond to your question, and then I am also going to respond to your question. Because I want you to know that that process works both ways.
You guys have been awesome.
Wait a
I'm going
minute.
to give these guys a last, I want to say thank you, and then I'm going to give you guys a last word too, so that we
Okay.
keep ourselves on.
Okay, well, I'll respond very quickly and then I'll give my last word. Okay, so the one thing that CPS admittedly knows is that we need to be better in community engagement. And we haven't quite figured it out yet. We try.
School board's better than the city council.
Yeah. So we try. And I think the Council of Great City Schools is helping us with that. So with that, let me just say it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And I have supported School Board School ever since it started. And when Elisa Hoffman was on school board, she was one of my mentors coming into CPS. So I have a great deal of respect for the work that she's doing. I appreciate the diversity of thought and the just genuineness that you all have brought to this discussion. And I do think it's people like yourselves who we look forward to I'm a board member, we gotta have people who wanna do this work. It's easy, I'm not gonna say it's easy to work in the schools, but I mean from a lot of people, like yourself, you're professional, you go in, you wanna help the kids or whatever, but you gotta have good people sitting on the board. If they ain't good, then you're not gonna have good outcomes. So you gotta think about that too. You gotta think about that. So thank you again for allowing me to be here and speak about my role as a board member.
I agree with Carolyn.
Okay. You final.
All I can say is thank you. Thank you for your comments, your suggestions, and your ideas. Sometimes you don't know how good you're doing it until you hear about people doing it, so I'm happy.